Chapter 1. The studio lights were blindingly bright. Even though I was used to them, it was a new experience for me and I was blinking in their glare. Today, I was on the other end of the camera, facing it instead of pointing it. I had forgotten just how much heat the lights generated. Sweat was running down my neck and back, and I wondered if the makeup my face had been plastered with had streaked and run. Beside me, in her wheelchair, was Anicia, my wife, although the fashionable term had apparently become life partner. Things had certainly changed while we had been gone. She was also my recording engineer, which is how we had met. We had worked so well together that we decided to make the relationship more permanent. I for one felt no regrets despite our present situation. She was still getting used to the loss of one leg. Fortunately, the chair was only temporary. Once her prosthetic had been finished and fitted, she could start learning to walk again. And we could get off the surface of the planet, with its crowds and pollution, and back to our home in orbit. I wasn't a big fan of Earth. I had become unable to cope with its crowds and the constant demands that mere existence made on your life. All the petty politics and jealousies. The point scoring that was no part of life in space, where you worked for the common good. The synthetic fibers in my clothes scratched my skin. I was used to cotton. You wore natural fibers in space. You didn't want a static spark spoiling your day. The floor manager, little more than a shadowy shape behind the camera, counted us in. 4, 3, 2, live, he said. The red lights came on over the cameras, and the program's presenter, Britt Hells, walked into the lights. She had been standing behind the camera and in shadow. A tall, willowy figure, she stood slightly off to one side of us. She had been dressed to emphasize her legs. Was that all part of the studio's plan? "Good evening, everyone," she began, reading from the auto cue over the camera. I wondered who had written her words. Whose side were they on? "The news just recently has been full of the amazing story from the planet Kisar Alu, where the well-known explorer Ballantyne Alysom and the remnants of his team have been rescued. It seems that over a year after they disappeared, they have performed one of the most amazing feats of survival." She moved to stand between us. The camera swung to focus on all three of us. At that moment, I felt more nervous than I had at any time over the last year. I took Anicia's hand. It shook slightly. "We have the first two of the party who have been released from the hospital with us tonight," she continued. "Ballantyne Alysom is still unconscious and listed as critical because of injury sustained whilst on the planet. We must rely on the account of these two, husband and wife, Davis and Anicia Jansen, the expedition's official photographers for Galactographic magazine. Tonight and over the next few weeks, they're going to tell us the story of just how they came to survive the series of events that led them to being marooned on that savage planet." That was quite an introduction. Now we had to tell our story to the masses, who I knew would be huddled around their receivers. The broadcast was live on Earth and all the colonies, and the new QE relay stations. There wouldn't be an inhabited planet that couldn't watch us live. That was a new development. When we had left, the transmission speed for video signals to the outer planets was only as fast as the ship carrying the file. Now, quantum entanglement computers were sending video across the galaxy faster than light, using the instantaneous response of vibrating atoms in different places. I knew that if Ballantyne had been aware of what was going on, his temper would have got the better of him. He loved to be in control of the story, and had tied us up with non-disclosure agreements before we had set out. As we had discovered, it was his usual practice. He wanted to be the centre of attention and the recipient of all the credit. Well, this one was out of his control. Bearing in mind what had happened since we had set off, it was a good job he wasn't around. We had been on the receiving end of more than one of his sudden temper tantrums. After we had finished with our story, there was no way he would be able to spin or bluster his way out of any responsibility in the light of what I wanted to say. While I was waiting for Anicia to be discharged, I'd spent a day with the top men at Galactographic. After they had seen the video highlights of our story, the managers were happy to waive our agreement with Ballantyne, provided I just presented the video diaries we had salvaged. I was warned not to make any comments that didn't have solid video evidence to back them up. The lawyers representing Alysom were not so happy. Were they ever? But all of us that had made it back had come to accept. Someone was going to have to tell the story that the whole sector wanted to hear, and with the evidence that I had, I could back it all up. There was no need for conjecture. I knew it wouldn't be a pleasant job. I was about to set off on a path that would destroy the reputation of a man who had made his name as a fearless explorer and generous philanthropist, a man whose face had covered 1 million children's walls, whose books and video films had sold by the shipload. The next few hours would almost certainly ruin him. In some of his more devoted followers' eyes, it would make me seem like the bad guy. The trouble was, it had to be done. As long as I kept to the recorded facts, I could hardly be held responsible for his words or actions. Anyway, the dead demanded that I should do it. I could see their faces in my dreams, and they screamed at me for their voices to be heard. And for justice, I had the proof to back up what I was about to say. Galactographic had already seen the video logs I had kept in secret, and the things that I had found, things that Ballantyne must have hoped would never be found. They were working on the official line. It wouldn't be pretty for them either. It seemed that they were prepared to cut him loose and take the short-term pain. Britt was still talking when I considered all this. Anicia must have sensed my mood and squeezed my hand. Davis, Anicia will shortly be asking you to tell us what you've been up to while you've been away. But first, I think that a brief reminder of the life of Ballantyne Alysom, of his achievements, would be in order. Britt Hells was a fan of Alysom. She had told us as much in the green room. I was pretty sure she hadn't seen all the footage that the managers had. She must have had an inkling though. She seemed determined to get her retaliation in first. I got the impression that she wouldn't willingly let her idol's reputation be tarnished by a mere cameraman and a crippled sound engineer. She had already mentioned his injuries and glossed over Anicia's. While his were significant, they could hardly be used as a justification, especially once the way they had happened came out. The studio went silent as the taped piece about Alysom was broadcast. Hells fetched us tea and sat on a chair as she pulled up between us, displaying lots of toned thigh. Anicia eyed it with annoyance. I ignored it. Skinny blonde announcers weren't my type. You could cut the atmosphere with a knife. So, what was it like when things got rough? She said as we sipped our drinks. On the monitors, we could see Alysom's life unfolding. Reminders of his good deeds flowed over the screen behind us as I hesitated, still unwilling to start the chain of events that would vilify him. Beside me, Anicia had no such qualms. He was fake and a conniving bastard, she spat. If he had been a real man instead of a coward, I would still have both of these. She waved her hands at her leg. Britt looked suitably shocked. She had seen snippets of the video, the things the network had used in teasers to make sure everyone was watching. It had been enough to get everyone interested. She must have realized that there was so much more. Could she be wondering if it was worth being a cheerleader for him? In the same way that Alysom had manipulated information to boost his profile, was she now ready to do the same to protect him while we tried to shoot him down? We would see. The segment finished. I knew it had all been about how Alysom had rescued National Geographic magazine and turned it into Galactographic. How he had made it the most exciting thing on the known universe, about his pledge not to take a penny from the profits he made. How everything he earned was put back into worthy causes, about his legion of devoted female fans who called themselves the Alysomettes. Anicia had been one, once. Now I knew how he had done it, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. The floor manager called out, "We're coming back! Stand by!" The red light came on. Britt turned to me and forced a smile. "So, Davis, how did it all begin?" she asked. The camera swung at me. I took a sip of tea and a deep breath. It's taken me a while to piece it all together, I said. Towards the end of our time on Kisar Alu, we were split into 3 groups, and even now, some of the main players' actions are uncorroborated. I've edited together all the video I could find, and made sense of the timeline as much as possible. One thing is clear. The deaths of 2 members of the expedition are suspicious, and the prime suspect isn't able to be here to defend himself. Britt looked shocked as I carried on. We have so much information to show you. We've spoken to Galactographic, and we're going to split it into segments. Tonight's program will look at the events leading up to our arrival on the planet we now know to be Kisar Alu. That was the agreement. We were still editing the video for the later episodes. Much of it was mundane, but there was enough excitement to make this a whole series. And now, it would all come out. Not tonight, as I had said. This was just the first in a series of films that Galactographic had planned. There would be this one to set the scene. Then, several more dealing with the time up to our separation, one for each of our adventures, and finally, a longer piece showing the ending and our rescue. And that would be the one where the fireworks would really begin. Well, let's see the start of the story, Britt said. The tape rolled. The light on the camera went out, and we sat back to watch ourselves on the monitor. This, more or less, was what the viewer saw.